Welcome everybody to the Brain Capital Markets Day 2021. Focus back, the Brain Engineered Cas. My name is Michael Schneiders. I'm the Head of Investor Relations at Brain, and I have the honor today to lead you through the Q&A session. Before we start, let me just get to some housekeeping items. First, please be aware that this call will be recorded. Secondly, for noise comfort, questions can only be submitted via the chat function or via email. Please send these emails to my email address at mis@brain-biotech.com or our generic IR address. I will try to direct your questions to the most appropriate person and presenter, but if you'd like to address your question to a specific person, please note so by handing in your questions. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to start the Q&A session today, and I would ask all the presenters to quickly introduce themselves, and maybe we start in alphabetical order. First with Adriaan, then with Lukas, Michael, and Paul. Adriaan, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Adriaan Moelker. Hopefully you've seen the video this morning. Welcome to the Brain Capital Markets Day. Very excited to be able to present this technology to you. But we'll talk more about it later. On to the next one.
Also, a warm welcome from my side. I'm happy to be here today as the CFO of Brain AG and also the responsible lead in commercializing the technology we are talking about today. So you've probably seen me talking quite a bit in my video this morning as well. Happy to receive your questions. Michael?
Well, so my name is Michael Krohn. I'm leading the R&D here. And as Lukas and Paul and Adriaan, you've seen or probably seen our videos, and we are happy to present and answer your questions during this Q&A session.
Welcome everybody. My name is Paul Scholz. I am the technical lead of the BEC program and also responsible for the genome editing and bioinformatics at Brain. And I discuss all the scientific questions that you have about our new BEC technology today.
All right, perfect. And we got the first questions already coming in. So let me start with this one, directed to Adriaan actually. Adriaan, when you started at Brain, were you aware of BEC technology and what massive economic potential this could have for Brain?
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, good. Clearly, when I joined Brain, I had no idea about BEC. I could not know when I didn't know when I joined, but be informed that that changed quite quickly. When Michael here on the call and Paul informed me about this program, to which I said, "You did what?" We of course immediately saw the enormous potential for that program, and we've been developing it ever since. In previous calls, I have mentioned when the question came from investors or analysts, what were you surprised about when you joined Brain? And I said the breadth and the depth of the technology was really impressive. And actually, what in a roundabout way, what I was talking about is also the BEC program, where I was quite happily surprised to find this within Brain. So happy to develop that, and I was really glad that that was part of the portfolio, Michael.
I have a second question, which is directed to Lukas, actually. And the question is, Lukas, can you please elaborate a little more, and when do you expect exactly news flow on your patent situation?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. Good question. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Thanks. When talking about the patent, there's a couple of important things to mention. First of all, we do not talk about one patent. Therefore, we need to kind of segregate and be very clear what we are talking about. And maybe it's the best way to divide that into three categories. First, our main IP on the main technology, which we call BEC, so Brain Engineered Cas. Then dependent IP on this independent IP, EI application IP based on the base technology. And lastly, BEC independent IP. And I'll maybe explain them separately to give you some guidance on what we expect with regard to the different patents. First of all, when we communicated about BEC or our CRISPR development in the first place, we had mentioned that reaching certain milestones, especially in the field of IP, would be really important. And we communicated that we would hope to be able to communicate something during this fiscal year already. So the year ending September this month. And we were really happy that we actually could communicate something a couple of weeks ago on our patent situation. And that refers back to the question, how likely do we believe it is that we can get our main patent, so the nuclease, which is our lead candidate, which Michael and Paul have been talking about in their videos, that we can get that patented. And one of the hurdles we saw that from feedback we got from the patent authorities in the first place, we get feedback, please show that your technology works better than your next neighbors. And we were happy that we could show that with data, with experiments, we could show that our technology actually works better than next neighbor sequences, which then made us much more convinced that we would be able to get freedom to operate. So the next milestone when it comes to the main patent will be the publishing of that patent in the next year. That will be early next year, the patent will be published. However, it will take quite some time until we get information about approval. When the patent is published in January, others could say, okay, we would be infringing them, or we can't get this IP. However, based on what we know so far, we see this as very unlikely. In the contrary, we are convinced that we have a very good position to actually get this patent granted. The next thing is then the dependent IP, EI application IP, this is category 2. And we have talked about that in our talks too. And the important bit about the application IP is that we can enable ourselves to apply the technology, the base technology, in several different organisms. And about the strategies, what we do there, we have talked in some detail in our videos. And then last but not least, we also expect to be able to communicate new news flow when it comes to BEC independent IP. And that refers back to the over 2,000 nucleases, new nucleases, which we haven't had in our focus yet, as we are focusing on our lead candidate, EI BEC. So all these 3 categories we expect to see news flow on. We see ourselves well positioned overall when it comes to our IP position. And when communicating in the future, we will also be differentiating, and we will be very clear about which in these categories we are in. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, we got a follow-on question, maybe on a same topic, different angle. Maybe Michael Krohn can answer that. To clarify, how can you file for dependent IP when you consider yourself a potential top-level IP holder at the same time?
Okay, I hope you can hear me all. So,
yes.
If you file IP in the first place, usually you try to get the whole area protected. So therefore, you usually file sequence IP and novelty for the enzyme itself. So this is the main IP you like to broaden in the end. So in case it gets published, everyone has access to this IP and can now start to make his own mind on the situation. To get an even more broader space for protection, you file dependent IP usually. So this means application IP. So considering that you have IP and protected on the sequence, you use the enzyme, in this case our BRAIN Engineered Cas, to file application IP, for example, in different organisms, the way how you use it for biotech applications and tasks. And this is the so-called application IP. So with that, you not only have protection on the sequence itself, but also on the way you handle that for the market. And this is dependent IP, which we usually you need that for getting a broader space in the whole field.
plus Michael, if I may add on that, the problem is if we let that happen, that others can file application IP based on our IP, on our base technology, they can potentially block us in certain areas. Therefore, it is that important to us to invest a lot now in getting ourselves a lot of protection in certain application areas which are really important to us, and B, to make sure that we have the right partners on board that we can develop the technology with. And one of these partnerships, and actually one of these applications, we have announced a couple of days ago with the University of Leiden.
Thank you, guys. I have another question, which I think goes to Paul. Could you go more in detail about the mode of action and explain it to a fellow scientist?
So, yeah, actually, I cannot go too much into detail because we have not disclosed it yet, and it's part of some of these application IPs that we are writing in some areas where we think that our new mode of action could be beneficial in comparison to classical CRISPR nucleases. So we are using these new mode of action to get IP on in certain application areas. But I think it's quite clear from the two examples that I showed in my presentation that the mode of action is different because the results look quite different. Because what we see, and it is not just with the two examples, also in other types of cells where we are already using the BEC technology, is that we are seeing this strong decrease in the overall cell population. But those cells that are able to survive the BEC treatment, they are edited in a high efficient manner. And this is important steps. And of course, this huge cell depletion in some application areas, this could be a downside. But there are also application areas where this is an advantage compared to classical nucleases. So we're still working on this. So we're still trying to figure out how exactly our BEC is working. But with the knowledge that we have already gathered, we are already in the filing process for application IP. We think that our BEC technology could have a big advantage over the current technologies that are in the CRISPR field.
Thank you. And again, staying on IP, but now back to Lukas. Here's a question: how large is the percentage of IP application costs for BEC? I think an indication on how much IP costs of a total investment budget, I guess.
That will depend. That will depend on how much dependent IP we will file together with partners or ourselves. Of course, if we do a lot of these things ourselves, we will have a significant investment in IP cost as well. To give you an idea, for the next year, we are planning with a low to mid 6-digit investment in IP cost. That can, however, also change, of course, if we, for example, get to major breakthroughs, which we would then potentially also want to get protection on a almost worldwide basis.
Thank you. And another question to Lukas. Where do you see the advantages in creating another BRAIN group company specifically for BRAIN, but again will have additional potential companies under its umbrella, i.e. spin-outs?
Yeah, people have asked me that before. Why do you need another company? And I like to refer back to what we believe works well or has worked very well in BRAIN, and that is the SolarScure project we have spun out. Because what it does, and I've talked about that in my talk as well, it creates focus. And therefore, we see one company, which as depicted in the slide is the BRAIN NewCo, as the company that focuses purely on developing and commercialization of the technology. And that is, from my point of view, important because I want the people that work on that project to mainly focus on that and not to also do all sorts of other things, which then create distraction again and which reduce the likelihood in the end of a successful project. And last but not least, of course, why do we need to have additional deals below that company or additional companies below that? Very simple. The NewCo shall be focusing on the platform technology development, but not the application itself. The application will be either done in BRAIN Biotech AG, where we use the technology in our tailor-made solutions business, or the technology will be pushed down to the next level, where we will do, for example, with partners, joint ventures, or where we will work on partnerships, where we might do spin-outs for the different markets that have also been shown in the presentation. And as said, we need that flexibility to be able to find the right structure for each application and each market, because they're so different, and we're having a platform technology, but the value arrives from the applications itself.
Well, I guess going back to science and to Paul, there is a question: can you re-explain what differentiates BEC from CRISPR-Cas9 beyond the patent topics?
Yeah, so of course one major thing is the patent situation, but beside from this, also on the technical side, we could already show the different mode of action, where we think that we have, first of all, application areas where we are better, and we have application areas where Cas9 is not suited at all to work there. We cannot disclose yet the application areas, but one of the application areas where we think that we might have a huge potential with our BEC technology is diagnostics, and that was already mentioned in our slides. But we are also thinking about different application areas where we are better, or where Cas9 is not suitable at all, or the classical CRISPR-Cas nucleases like Cas9 and CPF1, they are working, quite similar. Different molecule, different mode of action also between them, but quite similar results. And our BEC technology seems to work quite different. And this brings some downsides, but also a lot of potential for other application areas. But we cannot disclose yet all the application areas where we are already thinking about and starting to work on.
I think an even more detailed question for Paul as well is on your slides of the petri dishes. Can you explain why you observe a decrease in the cell population when you activate BEC? Does it mean that the cells don't survive the treatment? If so, can you explain why? I mean, is there toxicity associated with the treatment?
So this is exactly based on the mode of action. So it's hard to explain why without disclosing the mode of action. But what we could show is that we have some kind of toxicity by the BEC nuclease, but it is a guided toxicity. So it's not a general toxicity. It's not that the BEC in general is toxic. If you induce BEC into the cell, it gets toxic when the spacer matches the protospacer region on the genome. So it's a guided toxicity. And this leads to the decrease on the overall cell population. We think we might know how it is working, and we have a good hypothesis how it's working, and we are actually working to discover how the mode of action is working in detail. But it's too early to speak about this or to disclose this, because we are still in a process to evaluating this.
Okay, and going back to Lukas and into business terms, Lukas, what can we expect in terms of top-line contribution from BEC in 2021? Or 2021, 2022, I guess it is.
Yeah, I got the question. So for the next year, we are planning on investing, as I've shown in my slide, in building and enriching our IP position in the level of the dependent IP, but also as a top-level IP holder. So that will be a major level of investment for next year. We will probably not be closing too many licensing deals with huge revenue potential in the next 6 months or so. That will take some time to develop. However, what we do expect is and I've talked about that in my presentation, we do expect that we should be able to close deals in the tailor-made solutions business with the business model We CRISPR for You. And we expect at this point that we will be reaching a low 7-digit amount in terms of revenue in our tailor-made solutions business for that next year.
I guess we stay with you, Lukas. You seem to be very popular here. today.
It's an analyst call, essentially. So
absolutely, yes. What are the potential investments for BEC after the first investment phase of 10 to 20 million?
The potential investments are then going to be twofold. First, when talking about the IP and platform development investments, we of course have options to further develop the technology. We have some ideas there already. We will at some point need to decide what we actually want to do. Some ideas are to do protein engineering, to maybe even make the technology work better, to create a so-called dead bag, which can be used for completely different applications. And there's a couple of other things. But that's just one thing. The major area where I expect investments and where also the big value which we can show you directly will come from applications. And currently we are in negotiations and discussions with several partners on constructs, partnerships, joint ventures, spin-outs for these different applications where we would expect to, for example, invest in a diagnostics company or to support the start of a diagnostics company if we can prove our mode of action. And there's also a couple of other areas which we see as very interesting opportunities. But again, the investments in the next phase would then be more into application areas.
Okay, and then I think we stay with you, Lukas. What are the pros and cons for the different funding options of a new core, and where is your current preference?
The current what? Sorry?
Your current preference, i.e., what's your preferred way of funding?
I mean, we have talked, or I have talked and outlined the different options we have. Fundamentally, it's two different options. Either we fund through BRAIN, or we fund through the NewCo directly. Funding through BRAIN has the advantage that we would retain all upside for our current shareholders. The downside of that, of course, is that we essentially have a lower level of risk sharing at this stage, but we would also have the advantage that we would not have to partner at this point already, or to get investors in on a NewCo level at this point already, because if you get investors in early, you of course always create complexity. If you then have a board in the NewCo where you discuss all these things, which now we can do in a very agile team. I mean, most decisions we take is Michael, Paul, and myself being in a call every week, texting each other more or less all day. And when we talk about bigger investments or bigger decisions, we get Adriaan to join us, but we would lose that agility and flexibility if we would get too many external money in on a NewCo level at this point. An advantage the NewCo level has, or getting investment in on a NewCo level at this point, would of course be that we could externally verify the value we see in that technology to you at this stage already. It would, on the other hand, also take some time to get that investment in and to set these structures up. So these are kind of the different options we see. Currently, we are evaluating all options. I do see a slight tendency to say that we might do the first investments rather from a position out of BRAIN, to then have a much stronger position when it comes to IP and generated assets. And then in the next step, when it comes to financing, for instance, investments in applications, we would rather be seeking out external money to fund that. That's probably rather my preference right now, but again, we are looking at all options.
Very clear. Question to Michael Krohn. We understand that your BEC has demonstrated DNA targeting activity in selected bacteria, fungi, and yeast. When do you expect to have more data of additional application fields but specifically in mammalian cell lines?
Well, thank you for this question.
You're
If I would be in your shoes, I would exactly ask the same question. I could, as usual, offer you the answer. You know, Rome wasn't built in one day, and so on. So I try to get a bit more precise here. I guess with all the efforts we are currently doing here, and we know that mammalians, for example, is an important field of application for us. We're investing a lot here, and we see our horizon to really identify the mode of action and the application and feasibility in mammalian cells within 2022. This is our horizon to do that. Everything else on top of this, telling you we will be able to do that in April next year, would be not fair to you and not to us. But you can bet our motivation is also for the addressable market we are looking at, to really strengthen our invest in mammalian applications. So we are on that for 2022.
Okay, Michael, a bit easier question for you to follow on with. What makes you so confident that your product technology will be successful and able to compete with existing solutions?
That's in a way really a bit more simple. On the other hand, without knowing everything about BEC currently, but especially if you look at the genome editing market, which is really striking to us, there are not that many solutions. We have the Cas9 technology, which is great. So simply state that. So we are not here really to say anything against Cas9, and Lukas, as well as Paul and me, we laid out to you why it's so important to us to identify freedom to operate. On the other hand, genome editing is so important, and this is the next technology here in biotechnology. You need diversity. So there are a lot of detailed things about Cas9 which you would like to have an opportunity of a different mode of action to do that. So therefore, having another player on the market offers you a lot of space to maneuver in that market, and offers you also application potential, which we might even not know yet. It will come up next year when we know the next steps, how BEC is really working. And we identify that every week when we access microorganisms in our calls. So you can't believe this is happening here and this is happening there. So therefore, it is advancing. And so therefore, I'm really a believer here, and our motivation is high enough to do that. This has opportunity in the market. And as simple as it is, simply by being more diverse in the genome editing market, you need more tools to address that huge market.
Thank you. Coming back to business, and I guess that's a question for Adriaan and Lukas. Well, how can you believe that 10 to 20 million investments are enough to compete with competitors out there who got 9-digit amounts to spend?
Adriaan, do you want to kick it off? I've been talking a lot so far.
Yeah, I mean, the competitive space here is intense, and there's lots of investment. Nevertheless, we feel we've got very exciting technology that is differentiated. On the scale of BRAIN, this is large, and on the global scale, maybe we're a smaller player. But for us, it will be a matter of focus. It will be a matter of focus to find those niches, to find those applications and these partners, particularly, that will allow us to A, be successful, and B, make it affordable. The partnership, I would like to stress, is in every project in BRAIN, and I've explained that to you before, is in every aspect of our product portfolio important. Finding the right partners for us is absolutely critical. Being a relatively small company and not having all of the skills, we will depend on partners. And as Lukas has explained in the video this morning, to find partners by segment and with specific characteristics that we look for is a very important next step. We've announced a few partners already, but be informed that we're looking for more and that we're going to develop that more. Lucas, you being the business owner of this project, maybe you want to add one or two things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's one important differentiation we have to make when we ask ourselves this question. And we had this same discussion, of course, as well. I mean, why should small brain be able to become a major player here? And I think what is important to refer back to the value chain. And this is why we have also differentiated where we intend to invest that money, where we intend to invest 10 to 20 million in the next years. The big important difference is that if you look at the big players that have invested 9 digits, which is quite something, they've invested that not into the pure technology development, but all these investments, or most of these investments, have been going into application developments, either building machines to be able to do a lot of CRISPRing, to do a lot of experiments at the same time. So essentially machine providers, or has been investments into specific applications of the technology, which are sometimes CRISPR included or CRISPR enabled products. When you, for example, look at what has been done with Cas9, is that there's companies that use CRISPR as a treatment and do clinical trials. That is, of course, a completely different business model, and that's also another step down the value chain. And this is why we wanted to be very clear about our investment in CRISPR will be in the development and of the technology and in protecting the technology. Applications then could become way more costly, but these things we would do with partners and with external investment. Maybe to add on that area.
I think, yeah, that's a good addition. And again, on the partnership model, not only for BEC, but for many of the things that we're doing, whether that be on BRAIN or on other projects we've got. This is the model, and that's the one we want to expand.
Let's get a whole series of questions now to Lucas. Well, first of all, could BEC help to achieve an operational break even earlier than initially expected, or do you expect that the necessary investments will postpone the break even further out?
I think we have tried to communicate about that already in our last calls after announcing the technology. We see our guidance unchanged, which is also true for the EBITDA break-even guidance or comments we've made about. If you exclude our investments and also revenues from we make from our CRISPR development, what we will do, therefore, is to show all investments we make into CRISPR going forward separately, and that will, of course, include also businesses or revenue we make from that project. So we will show it separately, and for the rest, the guidance remains completely unchanged.
Okay,
what we will do, so one last addition, sorry. What we will do, though, of course, is that we will, and you've seen that on one of my slides, we will make sure that we get the right people that have been working on that project beforehand already into that new structure, first into the ambidextrous organization, and in the second step into the NewCo, which would then, of course, also slightly reduce personnel expense on the BRAIN AG standalone without CRISPR basis.
Yeah, maybe a follow-on or in the same space is we understand that you plan to invest 1.3 to 1.7 million in your BEC platform in fiscal year 21. What are your targets for the next years?
That will depend. That will depend on which partnerships we can sign, which partners we can attract, and also how the development will proceed further. However, right now our estimate is that we will be in a mid seven-digit amount in investing in CRISPR next year.
And then maybe one additional question to the addressable market. What is the addressable market, and in which countries do you want to introduce the platform?
Is that to me? Shall I start?
I think you start with that, yes.
Okay. Looking at the addressable market, yeah, that's a very good question. We have of course had the same discussions because when we do our NPV calculations, we always start with the addressable market. And when we sat together, we said, okay, let's try to put together an NPV sheet for BEC. And we were sitting there and we're asking ourselves, okay, what is the addressable market? And that refers back to the point I made earlier, that it is a platform technology. So you don't have one addressable market, but you have one addressable market per application that you can use that technology in. Therefore, I can unfortunately not really give you a clear answer on what the addressable market is. If you want to evaluate the technology, you essentially need to look at what are the most probable use cases and what are the addressable markets that we could tackle in all of these markets. And Michael has talked about it in a little more detail. I've shown it briefly in my presentation as well. We do see a list of applications and markets we could target with that technology. And I'd be referring you back there to the slide we have shown in our deck.
Maybe I can add at least one further thing here. The addressable markets for us are also kind of limited by the applications. So I just want to give you one example. If you go for therapies, for example, this is a long way, so it takes you years to really go there and get an application to the market. So this is dependent on approvals, clinical phases, and this is even true in animal models. So if you go in this direction, it probably takes longer. Other things like the diagnostic fields, if we are really able to transfer the mode of action to this field, it's closer to the market. So this addressable market is of course earlier than these animal models and therapy-based things. And the immediate markets are those one where we are already in, and this is biotechnology at its best, like precise fermentation, production strains, because here we already have the enabling technology in these hosts necessary for this application field. So therefore, these are our first markets.
Thank you, Michael. Now we have a question I think was a bit tricky, and this goes back to Lukas. On your slide 37 today, which is a slide focused on most promising use cases, best strategic fit in diagnostic industrial biotech, can you give more details, maybe some examples, where BRAIN will position itself in that space?
Was that question focused on the diagnostics part, or what was the question focusing on?
I think it was generally, I think, on the slide. So if you can give examples, basically, where the best fits are and in what directions they could go.
Yeah. First of all, we of course don't have all answers yet. That refers back to the mode of action, but that also refers back to the question of mammalian cells, EI, in which cells can we actually use the technology. So what we see today is that we are sure that we will be able to use the technology in the field of industrial biotech. Industrial biotech, meaning, for example, host strain optimizations. We have, and we couldn't talk about that in the videos as we have done them last week, but only recently, EI, this week, have we announced our partnership with the University of Leiden, where we do started the optimization of our Aspergillus strains. And these strains are then used to produce enzymes. So that is one field where we certainly see applications and also value for our technology. Then we also see that we are pretty confident that we can use the technology in the field of diagnostics in case we can prove our hypothesis on the mode of action. And we know it must sound a little bit frustrating to you. We talk about all the mode of action hypothesis all the time, and a lot of your questions refer back to that, and we can't really tell you much about it. But it is in your interest that we are not communicating that to the public, as we do see that communicating that would probably be an issue from a competition perspective. Plus, it might also spoil some of the AP applications we have running, which we, of course, want to avoid at any cost. If you look at the areas which are not highlighted, EI, therapeutics, agriculture, livestock, animal models, all these things can be really interesting markets too. However, we would think that these things are areas where we are less likely to do developments, product developments, either CRISPR-enabled or CRISPR-included products ourselves. So I would say that the focus on what we would do more ourselves is probably more in the area of diagnostics and industrial biotech. And that then essentially refers back to the question, or to slide 35, 2 slides before, where we have shown our different options for the path to market, EI. Doing things ourselves or with partners, doing joint ventures or spin-outs, or just pure out-licensing.
I'd like to add one or two things there.
Yeah.
I'd like to add 1 or 2 things there, maybe not specific to this slide. I think it was 37, but more generic concepts in BRAIN. Is that, and I've addressed that in the analyst call earlier this week. We've done a customer survey and we've assessed our unique selling points more generally. And what we're seeing and what our customers are appreciating us for is moving away from, let's say, bioarchive focused company towards a solutions provider in terms of solving their problems, in terms of fermentation. Michel mentioned precise fermentation, all these things. So we're on that journey to say we're multidisciplinary, but actually we provide solutions. Call it a systems integrator, or certainly a company that provides solutions. BEC fits extremely well in that picture. Since it's a platform technology that enables other things to happen, the bioeconomy, all these things that we're trying to do. So thank you, my predecessor Jürgen Eck, for starting all of this, and we're very excited to develop it further. But it is on the journey that BRAIN is on, and that has a broader meaning. Now, how these segments fit into that specifically, whether it's diagnostics or pharma or agriculture, difficult to say, but we're looking to play that role to be a solutions provider, integrator, based on very strong technology platforms.
Thank you very much. And I think we have, let's say, a more general, more society-bound question, maybe to Michael Krohn. Michael, why do you think genome engineering is now more accepted within society, although it's pure GMO?
Yeah, well, this is one of the questions I really like to answer. So if you look at GMO technologies, so the huge difference when you look from the genome editing side is one term, it's precision. Precision is something which is really making the difference. If you look at the random kind of technology in former times, where you always got the question, how can you be sure that this organism is now safe and so on? This is kind of now past times, because with the tool genome editing, you really do precise modulation in a genome. So, and therefore, it's getting more and more accepted. And with all the omics technologies, you also get more insights in those new organisms. This is one part. The other part is acceptance. Quite simple. If you now look at people everywhere around the world, looking at foods, looking at products that are already on the market, if you look in the US, there's already genome edited food in the market. So, and this is not like if you would compare that with atomic weapon-like styles, or with something where you create monsters or so. No, it's already there, and it's safe, it's tasty, and it's done in a precise way. And so therefore, I think, and on top with the pandemic situation we've seen that with the supply chain interrupted all over the world. So the idea of getting, again, more decentralized and getting a vertical fermentation as a food resource, for example, is something which is closely connected to these new technologies to become more and more independent, and using this technology will become a no-brainer, I would say, in the future.
It was very clear, and sorry, Lukas?
Yeah, maybe just to add one or two things, and I think Adriaan has talked about that in his talk as well. It is about the applications, not about the technology. This is what we are looking at, and just because I had to smile when Michael showed me that the first time, or the first products that have been brought to the market in the US were actually apples, where they knocked out one gene, which made these apples not getting brown anymore. And that's, of course, pretty American, because they did that because now they can sell sliced apples in plastic boxes, which you can, of course, also question, but it shows that this is a pretty accepted technology. And also, if you look at another application, which is artificial or which is meat, meatless meat, there is some big companies out there. I won't name any names, but you will know some of them. If you look, for example, at the color that is in these burgers, you will find out that this color is actually produced by a genetically modified production host. So these things are already pretty well accepted, and I hope that Michael's vision comes true, that people will accept that more and more as well when we look at Europe.
Maybe I can add one further sentence, because we really mean it when we say it, and we stressed it several times. The idea is really, and this is our motivation, to edit the living for the better. This is really an idea, and we would like to live this slogan in our future work.
Maybe another question for Michael. Why are there so few IP-independent Cas systems?
Yeah, I also like this question, and I can give you an easy answer. So from my point of view, this IP is created, that has been created by Broad and by ERS Genomics, is one of the first biotech IPs which is made in such an intelligent way that it really includes a lot of applications, whole families, and it's not only based on a sequence. So therefore they are very successful, and there's not that much space around that. So the working technology, it's not easy to get a new one. So therefore this is one of the main reasons. To identify new Cas systems is time consuming, and you see the world is already using Cas9, not only officially, but also everywhere in the world. Everyone is testing that. So there are a lot of reasons to stay with the technology and to wait until the IP problem might be solved. And on the other hand, it's not that easy to get independent IP, what we have done here. And this is also really due to the fact that this IP has a substantial impact on the market and is not based on one sequence. It's more based on the mode of action of the Cas9 to make it a bit more simple. And therefore it has this impact.
Thank you. And a more technical question maybe then to Paul. In the BEC presentation, you explained that BEC is an engineered CRISPR nuclease. So why did you actually engineer your BEC protein?
To enhance activity and the efficiency. So the original sequence that is derived from metagenomic, or is a metagenomic sequence, was not that efficient in genome editing. So we needed to optimize the sequence to make it more efficient and more specific for genome editing. That's the main reason.
I have a question for you, Paul. You had a wish list basically on the presentation of saying what you would wish for in a new nuclease. The question is basically, does your BEC nuclease hit some of these points on the wish list?
Yeah, we think we will hit some. So we cannot talk about anything about it, but first of all, so just based on the size, our protein is a little bit smaller. It's not big margin smaller, but it is a little bit smaller. And our protein is not optimized in a way to be small. So if you look at Cas9, there's development going on for more than 10 years, and a lot of scientists are working on Cas9, and our technology is quite new. So we are also thinking about doing protein engineering to get it even smaller. So to pull out some more sequences or some more amino acids, so it is smaller. Furthermore, when we are talking about off targets, also we are not able to disclose the mode of action, but we think that our mode of action will also lead to less off targets. We still have to prove this, and we still need to do this in a really strategic way to prove that that's really the case. But from the mode of action and from the data that we've already generated, we see that there's huge potential that our BEC protein has a lot less off targets. Then I think one point on the wish list was less immunogenic, because the classical Cas9 protein was found or was identified in a human pathogenic bacteria. And yeah, we just talked about it. Our protein is engineered, so there is no native origin from our protein. It's an engineered sequence, which means that there should be no immune reaction from humans if you would like to use it for therapy, for example. So I think this was the main things that we are able to disclose right now. But of course, we are thinking and we are working in all the directions that are on our wish list to test if protein is comparable or even better than Cas9, or maybe in some of the points it also has downsides. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very clear. Well, looking at my chat and looking at the email, I think we have actually no further questions. So I think we at BRAIN are all very excited about the opportunities that BEC has, and I hope everybody on the call and on the videos this morning, got a good grasp of that. And guys, thank you for sharing your visions on the call. If you have any further questions, please contact IR, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.